Hi, I'm George Williams with Cognitos, and in this session, we're going to look at how Cognitos applies intelligent automation to a mission-critical business process. Let's dive in. That particular process is called Procure-to-Pay. So what is Procure-to-Pay? Well, simply put, it's the process that every company goes through when they purchase goods, creating a PO, the goods being shipped to their warehouse, unpacking those goods, validating what they received. In some cases, when it's food, drugs, heavy metal, or machinery, that means it needs to also come with something called a COA, or a Certificate of Analysis. This simply means that those goods or whatever was shipped meets the quality specifications as required. And then lastly, the invoice, when we're meant to make payment. Now, what is the four-way match process associated with this? This is the important part. The four-way match process in Procure-to-Pay is where we validate that our invoice matches the goods receipt, matches the purchase order, and we also receive a healthy COA. After all, if we receive goods with no COA or goods that do not meet our COA, we cannot use them. It's easy enough, right? It is. In the real world, it's slightly more complicated. So let's take a look at that. Very quickly, we're a pharmaceutical company who needs to purchase goods. In this case, it's going to be ingredients to manufacture our drugs. So we're going to send out our PO, and several things are going to happen. Our busy accounts payable team is going to go to work tracking those different details in different systems. In this particular case, they're tracking the details in Smartsheet for quick comparison, as well as S/4HANA for logistics. Then the invoice comes in, track it in the different systems. Bill of lading lets us know what's coming to our warehouse. Eventually, goods receipts created, uploaded to, and created in SAP, and it continues. All to get to this step, we can do a four-way match to confirm we should pay or not yet pay this particular invoice. Now let's take a look at how that appears in Cognitos. Well, on the right here, we have the Cognitos platform. On the left, we have SAP. Now we've already gone ahead and created a purchase order for this. You can see it here. So let's jump back to Cognitos. The first thing you notice when you jump into Cognitos is some quick performance metrics on our automations running throughout our organization. You can see on the top right here, the amount of times our organization runs the automations over a period of time, indicating the value saved, time and money. Simple metrics. Each time the automation runs, in place of some manual step, it calculates the time saved, as well as the amount of money that was spent per that time. And these are metrics that our customers enter themselves. You can also see at a glance, the automation is running over time, as well as by automation. Then finally, how our automations are performing. What do I mean by that? Well, automations perform, they can really operate in two big buckets. One is your automation runs from beginning to end with no human in the loop. The other is a human in the loop. Now, what does that look like? Any process in the world eventually is going to have an unaccounted for scenario. Let's come up with one here. Well, let's say that we have a process that's extracting details from an invoice, similar to earlier, but the invoice you received is missing a purchase order number. And in our case, our operating procedure says that we look up the purchase order associated with that PO or with that invoice by using the PO number on the invoice. So when that's not available, what do? Well, it's those types of incidents which often lead to a large backlog, a pileup on the AP teams, where they have to come and figure those things out. We'll take a look at how Cognitos solves for that in just a moment. But let's dig into the details. What does it look like to create an automation with Cognitos? It's as easy as typing in exactly what you want in human language and letting Cognitos do the rest. So let me go ahead and type a prompt to get things started. Okay, I've typed my prompt. I've even typed a spelling error, but hey, let's put it all in there and press OK anyways. Now what's happening in the background is Cognitos is going to work looking at what I've asked it. It's going to assess what it needs to have involved in order to achieve the outcome, and then identify the tools that are required to do that. Now, when I say tools, what do I mean? Well, to create this particular automation, Cognitos would need access to SAP, as well as IDP for extraction, possibly even email if it's going to send out notifications or receive inbound communications like the invoices, like the goods receipts. Okay, You can see it's off and running, and it's going to start first with extracting the details on the invoice. Now you've noticed that I didn't tell it what to extract. That was intentional. I wanted to let Cognitos go to work to determine what would be necessary to extract to complete this process. Okay, it's going to continue on. Now for the sake of time, I've already gone ahead and had this conversation right here. Same prompt, extract the values from the PDF, corresponding PO, gave it a sample. Went through the process, similarly, extract the details, shared some information on what it extracted, and eventually came to the conclusion that it was capable of updating the PO and asked me if I wanted to create an automation. Now, once we hit this step, we now have an automation on the right here. When I say automation, I mean the SOP for automation. This is essentially the deterministic code that will execute every single time. Now, you saw back and forth before this. Once it gets to SOP and we approve it, it's locked in. It's deterministic. It's executing as if code. There will be no wavering, which is key. It's actually paramount for financial processes. So let's go ahead and run a process for the four-way match. What you're seeing here is me jumping into my production automations. You can say I have a few of them here. I'm going to jump into four-way match. And you see that I have a complete history of all my automations. I can jump into any one of them to see how it performed, the output. It's completely auditable. And we'll take a closer look at that in just a moment. You can see the SOP for this automation. Let's go ahead and run it. I'm going to provide an invoice, and it's off and running. Okay, now as Cognitos jumps through this process, it's going to execute from top to bottom, starting with extracting the details from my invoice. See, it has notes about optional fields, preparing the invoice data for SAP posting, then going through the process of retrieving data that it needs for other steps. I did mention that four-way match is part of this process. Mirror fields, APIs, information, all the way down to finally comparing the details and then generating a post. And lastly, validating the COA and then sharing information with us about the four-way match. So we'll take a look at that in a second. Okay, you can see it finished fairly quickly. Let's go ahead and before we take a peek at this, check over on the left in SAP. Just go ahead and refresh. Fantastic. We received our supplier invoice. And you can see it created our entry successfully, as well as uploaded the invoice to SAP for us. Now let's go back to our automation. In the output of this automation, it gave us some details. One of those details is a detailed markdown report telling us about the four-way match. And in this case, it's giving us the PO number, the supplier invoice number, other details that are associated with it to complete that match, in addition to the fourth match, which is going to be the COA. Which we can see. Okay, now in this case, we can see that it did not pass the four-way match. Expected pass, and it did not find the COA value. Now, what do? In this case, does our AP team log in every day to figure out what passed, what didn't? No. They have strategic work to do, so let's put the machines to work for them. In this case, we have Cognitos set up to notify our AP team when a match or a mismatch comes through. So you can see here that we have a mismatch, and it's because there was no COA. Now, without that being performed, that critical step, we cannot use these goods. Legally, we can't put them into production. So this allows us to be notified immediately, so we can call that vendor, let them know about the issue, and place a new order. Now, what would happen if it did pass? A similar notification, except all the variables would align. It's that easy. Now, there's one more important thing I want to share with you here. This particular automation is also set up to give you an analysis of your Procure-to-Pay environment. So what does that look like? Well, at a snapshot, it'll tell you over a period of time how much we processed, how much of it was straight through, and it looks like value identified. Interesting. As we look through the detailed snapshot, we can see that our payment exceptions are very low. touchless automation is very high. However, we are giving up $1.2 million of working capital. Why? Because we're paying our vendors very quickly as opposed to the industry book benchmark. So we have an opportunity to slow that down and keep that working capital on hand. Now, in addition to this, it's also identified that 86% of our orders are with a single supplier or single vendor. Well, that's massive supply chain risk. Specifically, if this vendor were to go out of business or something were to happen because we're using them for such a large percentage of our orders, that could materially impact our business. So that's something we want to look at and take action on. Well, down here below, it tells you exactly the steps to get started taking action on these recommendations. Okay, now with the time left, I want to show you one more important thing. What happens when things don't go perfectly? Now, when we ran this, we had an invoice. All the details were involved in the invoice. They were extracted. But that's not how the real world always works. So let's run it one more time. Okay. Now I'm actually going to run it twice. I'll tell you why in a second. Okay. Now, as this works through the process, similar as it did before, it's going to run into a hurdle. Why? Well, this process is going to it's going to extract all the values. It's going to identify in SAP which PO this invoice is associated with by using the PO value extracted from the invoice. What happens when it's not there? We can see that Cognitus has quickly identified that it's missing a critical value. It's trying to figure out if it has a path to resolve it. And let's see what it comes up with. The invoice extraction succeeded for 11 fields, but it couldn't find the PO number. It's sharing the values that it extracted from the invoice. That's good, gives us some intelligence, possibly to go look it up later. And it's coming to a conclusion. Because it cannot find the PO number and has no guidance on how to move forward, it's asking us for the PO number. This is an example of an exception that would end up in our guidance center. So that as soon as your AP team, or whoever the process owner is that owns this process, they're going to get a notification via Slack, Teams, or even email. It'll allow them to jump in here and remediate this particular exception. Now you can see that they have the run, they have the detailed run they can click into. They could use the different details from this run to look up in SAP what the associated PO is. Now let's think about that. In the real world, if I don't have a PO number on my invoice, how do I rectify this as a human? Well, I might go into SAP and use a different available data point on the invoice, like supplier ID. I could take the supplier ID on the invoice, which is there, search open POs or POs that have not been fulfilled by invoice, check the value of it, in addition to the quantity and the goods type, and match it that way. Well, that type of detail is exactly the tribal knowledge that allows Cognitos to overcome these hurdles. What do I mean there? Well, Cognitos incorporates this tribal knowledge as approved guidance. So what does that look like? I could simply pass that guidance off to the automation, approve it as a workaround. It'll add it to our troubleshooting guide, different steps, and when the automation hits it, like this one did here, failed to retrieve purchase order. Let's check it out. Okay, ran into the same issue, but it found the exact guide entry for that scenario. So it took the steps that I described to you that were in our guidance or our troubleshooting guide, applied them, and was able to locate the PO. Now, just to double check, we can see here that the PO number is definitely not visible. However, it was able to follow the procedures I outlined using the supplier ID or vendor ID to locate this particular PO. Okay, now you can see how Cognitos can easily eliminate over 70% of the manual effort associated with the procure-to-pay process. I'm George Williams. Thank you for your time. We're Cognitos. I'll see you next time.